So in the first trailer for Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2, we got brief looks at a lot of iconic moments in the film. We got the extended scenes with the Harkonnens and Fade Rotha on Gadi Prime. We got scenes with Paul and the Fremen, including that of Timothée Chalamet's character attempting to ride a sandworm. And we got teases of the culminating crysknife battle between both Paul and Fade. And while some of what was shown hints at what's to come in the ending parts of the film, we haven't really seen too much more of the Battle of Arrakeen, the final battle that will be adapted in that second part. So thinking about how it's detailed in the book and how Denis is approaching his adaptation as a whole, I'm going to be discussing how the filmmaker might take on that final battle in the ending of Dune Part 2. There will be spoilers from the book in this breakdown, so if you haven't read Frank Herbert's novel yet, or you don't want to know some of the details from the back part of the story, then I'd recommend watching this at a later time. Before I get into it though, if you want to keep up to date on any of my content surrounding Dune Part 2 and beyond, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating, subscribing to the channel, and turning on your notifications. But without further ado, let's dive into the Battle of Arrakeen in Dune Part 2. So the Battle of Arrakeen is arguably one of the most anticipated moments in Denis Villeneuve's upcoming film. It will detail the climactic events where Paul and the Fremen seek for vengeance against both the Harkonnen forces and the Empire for control of Arrakis, its trade, and the people there. While the scenes will likely feature some of the most relentless action from a Villeneuve film, what's more interesting about some of these ending segments is a potential look at the Emperor, played by Christopher Walken, as he finally arrives on the planet during that battle. And on top of this, if we are indeed getting a faithful adaptation of the sequences, there will also be a unique viewpoint of this very battle and an adaptation of it that fits in line with the central themes. Now, some of the final shots in the Dune Part 2 trailer showcase Paul and his assembled Fremen ready to fight the Harkonnens, and this follows the moments where he trains them in the weirding way, allowing for the formation of highly skilled warriors known as the Fedaykin. But we haven't seen much of what comes after, and that of course includes the battle that takes place. So to begin with, I'm going to be briefly describing what takes place in the Battle of Arrakeen so that we can then think about how this might be depicted on the big screen, both through filmmaking and through point of view. At the beginning of that battle in Frank Herbert's novel, the Emperor, Baron Harkonnen, and the Sardaukar arrive on ships that land behind the shield wall of Arrakeen. With a sandstorm approaching the city, Paul, Gurney Halleck, and Stilgar wait for the right moment to break through the shield walls with atomic weapons, and while they do so, the Fremen destroy parts of the enemy's ships so that they cannot escape the fury that awaits them. What follows is a quick and relentless assault against their combined forces. The Fremen attack the Sardaukar, and that compels the people of Arrakis to also join the fight against the Empire. Before Gurney blows up the shield and Paul and his Fedaykin prepare for battle, they do receive a message from their Sietch, one that notifies them of a raid where many were killed, including Paul's son Leto. On top of this, we learn that Paul's sister Elia Atreides was captured, and this becomes part of the plan that the Emperor, the Baron, Fade Rotha, and Raban construct to hold off the assault. However, their intimidation tactics fall short. The Emperor underestimates Elia's Bene Gesserit and now Water of Life developed abilities, because while she's with the enemy, she's able to get inside the mind of the Reverend Mother, and she also kills her grandfather Baron Harkonnen with a Gom Jabbar. This is followed by a potential iconic shot in the film of the Fremen approaching the Emperor and his men on many sandworms, bringing that mentioned fury and defeating the Sardaukar. While the battle does end there, it also transitions us into another battle, one that's more focused on the drama and politics that we love Dune for. Paul Paul accepts that he is now the Kwisatz Haderach, but he also worries about the potential jihad that he's seen in his dreams. So when Paul, now joined by Chani and Lady Jessica, confronts the Emperor and his men, he knows that there will be more schemes to stop him. We learn that the Emperor had given Furfir Hawat a poisonous needle to use to kill Paul, and that the Baron had already marked Hawat for death with poison. However, in an act of sacrifice, Hawat decides not to use the needle, eliminating an opportunity for the Emperor to kill Paul. In retaliation, Paul compels those of the Spacing Guild to get the Landsraad ships to leave, and if that isn't taken care of, he threatens to destroy all spice on the planet so that they won't have their supply. They do listen to this, and that also enrages the Emperor, who now has no support. The one hope for him, though, that this does end differently is that crysknife battle that takes place between Paul and Feyd Rautha. Feyd challenges him to a duel, one that he accepts, and after overcoming Feyd's cheating, Paul ends up winning the fight. In reaction to this, Count Fenring is ordered to kill Paul, but there's a realization that Fenring was almost a Kwisatz Haderach himself, so he refuses, and this follows with Paul asking the Emperor for the throne itself. His negotiation is that he will marry the Emperor's daughter, Princess Irulan, and after he does so, he still assures Chani that she will be his true wife, even if the princess is his royal concubine. So the novel ends with the battle being won, Paul as the new Emperor of the known universe, and as the Kwisatz Haderach. While this is seen as an abrupt ending, it's one that also leaves us with all the questions surrounding that mentioned jihad that Paul worries about. So now that we've briefly detailed that final battle, how might the filmmaker approach bringing it to the big screen? Well, like many things in his adaptation so far, I think it's going to be very faithful in the sense that the action will serve the story and questions that this ending poses. An effective action scene is one that serves the narrative, and Denis himself tends to apply that approach, especially when we think about how he did so in Part 1 and how he's done so in his other sci-fi films, like say Blade Runner 2049. In the book, the battle becomes a powerful moment, and while the whole sequence is over quite quickly, it describes the relentless force by which Paul and the Fremen assault Arrakeen. The whole point of it is to detail them as the unstoppable force that destroys everything, in turn becoming a symbol for the jihad that Paul has foreseen and aims to stop. In my opinion, the moment shouldn't be portrayed as one that is heroic, and like in the pages, it should be shorter, more provocative, and horrific in its imagery. We see many epic films and fantasy endings convey the heroic nature of what's taking place, and that of course is right for those particular stories. But Dune was quite the opposite. By sticking to its pages, it can become a more interesting approach to a final epic battle, and one that feels right for this very story. In the novel, Paul even tries to make things less severe by giving the Emperor the chance to surrender, but the fact of the matter is that he is not a hero. He is a symbol for the eventual jihad, and one that takes that destruction even further. So I do see this sequence being one that isn't committed to the more lengthy action like in the battles of Lord of the Rings for example, and rather one that, like the book, is around 10 minutes in length but effective at conveying the destructive themes that should be on display. I see it as a perfect reflection of the siege by the Harkonnens in the first film, but this time from that reverse perspective. And speaking on that different perspective, I think that also links into how this might be shot and what characters we get the point of view from. Of course, we're going to get a lot from Paul and the Fremen's perspective, but to convey the reverse nature of the destruction on show, I think we'll see some points of views from the opposite side too. In the book, we do get a POV moment from the Emperor. So like how in Part 1 we got the perspective of multiple Atreides figures, like with Duke Leto during that siege, I think we'll see more viewpoints from both the Emperor and the Harkonnens. It has been confirmed that Part 2 will have a lot more Harkonnen scenes throughout the film, and by giving the audience an intriguing viewpoint from their perspective, it could really demonstrate the eventual power that Paul and the Fremen rise to. I think during the battle, Denis is going to be faithful to those moments and give us scenes with the Emperor, as just like the audience, he's overwhelmed by the apocalyptic imagery. In Dune, it was never the action of the battles that made it so fascinating, it was the planning and reasons for them. And like when Duke Leto and the Atreides are assaulted by the Harkonnens, the idea of capturing the underlying plot and messages of that moment in reverse will make this battle that much more meaningful. So I think the same can be said about the Battle of Arrakeen and how it can symbolise the destructive path put in place and do so through an interesting point of view. And capturing this with a strong combination of Greg Fraser's cinematography, the practical effects that worked so well in the first film, and as a whole, creating a hellish aesthetic for the scene, it can really elevate the purpose of the whole moment. Overall, Paul's ascension to becoming Emperor and the Fremen's regaining of Arrakis is a complete reversal to what occurs during the events of the novel. The power structure changes and we are left to wonder how the Fremen's culture will change, whether that's transitioning into the easier route of spice mining or following their leader into space with a bloody jihad. The Battle of Arrakeen symbolises and sets in motion the change that's coming, and while it has dark parallels on what happened previously, it also leaves us with questions surrounding what this all means. One of those storytelling reflections is the crysknife battle between both Paul and Fade, which, like in the battle with Jamis at the end of part 1, sets up a motion of events to follow. Similar to how the Siege and the Battle of Arrakeen will have a reflection, I can see Denis stressing on the reflection between those very knife fights and essentially signifying the progression of Paul into a messianic figure. The original fight was that initial step towards this path, but this one would highlight the apocalyptic fears of his whole transformation. Obviously, what comes next is Paul's ascension to the throne, but there's also a sense of the unknown surrounding what his future actions involve. By expanding from that final battle, I think Denis will touch on the central thematic beats of this ending, showing that Paul does not know how he intends to stop the jihad, and that we as an audience do not know how he aims to bring peace and not war. In the book, he says, "They sense that I must take the throne, but they cannot know I do it to prevent the jihad." Paul hopes to stop the bloody deaths of millions, but the relentless push for revenge in that battle and what happens in Dune Messiah is something that only complicates that debate of a peaceful messianic figure or one of war. So the whole idea of how the abrupt ending of the novel leaves us on that very question is something that I think Denis will not be ashamed of adapting faithfully or stressing on. It is the somewhat second chapter to a potential Dune trilogy, and Messiah will wrap up the story of Paul Atreides. The storytelling reversals of part 2 can really showcase the big transformational twists, with whether Paul and the Fremen will align with peace or fury. So while the final pages are filled with fast-moving action, and while some say that the battle and Paul's ascension is anticlimactic, the destructive actions that take place will cement the ideas that part 1 posed. And the ending of part 2 can also act as a storytelling twist on many sci-fi franchises we've seen in the past or present. For example, while Star Wars was influenced a lot by Dune, Herbert's story had much more darker consequences and ones that do mark a change on the conventions of that type of tale. These are ones that fit in line with Denis Villeneuve's filmmaking style, and I think in that sense, the destructive nature of the Battle of Arrakeen, the different perspectives within that battle, and the questions it raises can be very effective at conveying the true meaning of Paul's ascension. But that was my video discussing how Denis Villeneuve might tackle the Battle of Arrakeen in Dune Part 2. With Paul riding a sandworm and the Water of Life scene, the final battle is definitely up there when it comes to my most anticipated moments in the film, and I'm excited to see how Denis will visually adapt it. From what we've seen of the film already, the visuals and cinematography from Greg Fraser look to be elevating this beyond the scale of Part 1, and I can only expect that technically they'll be doing some impressive things with the ending. Most importantly though, the way this final battle will portray the rise of Paul Atreides from the son of a duke into the Kwisatz Haderach is what will really propel it. Hopefully Denis and his team have done something incredible with it, and at the end of the day, we won't have long to wait to see it on a huge IMAX screen. But are you excited for the Battle of Arrakeen in Dune Part 2, and how do you think the director will go about adapting the iconic moments from the book over to the big screen? Let me know down below in the comment section. For much more videos and news on Denis Villeneuve's Dune universe, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.